Well, the high drama continues in Syria. Charlie Rose, on his program last evening on PBS, interviewed Bashar Assad for 1 hour. Very interesting, the observations. Let me give you some of the overview of that because you will want to know. There are other developments after that that we will be recording and relaying to you as well. But Charlie Rose started right away. And by the way, this, I think, was the first interview given to Western press by Assad in about 2 years. Charlie Rose, first question, what was the reality on August 21st? What happened in your judgment? Assad's reply, we're not in the area where the alleged chemical attack happened. We're not sure that anything happened. And then Rose interrupted. Even at this date, you are not sure that chemical weapons, even though you have seen the videotape, even though you've seen the bodies? Assad interrupted. No, I have. Rose interrupted. Your own officials have been there. Then Assad said, I haven't finished. Our soldiers in another area were attacked chemically. Our soldiers. They went to the hospital as casualties because of chemical weapons. But in the area where they said the government used chemical weapons, we only had video and we only have pictures and allegations. We're not there. Our forces, our police, our institutions don't exist. How can you talk about what happened if you don't have evidence? We're not like the American administration. We're not social media administration or government. We are the government that deals with reality. Rose. Well, as you know, Secretary of State John Kerry has said there is evidence that they saw rockets that fired from a region controlled by your forces into a region controlled by the rebels. They have evidence from satellite photographs of that. They have evidence of a message that was intercepted about chemical weapons, and that soon thereafter there were other intercepted messages. So Secretary Kerry has presented what he concludes is conclusive evidence. Assad, no, he presented his confidence and presented his convictions. It's not about confidence, it's about evidence. The Russians have completely opposite evidence that the missiles were thrown from an area where the rebels controlled. That reminds me about what Kerry said about the big lie that Colin Powell said in front of the world on satellites about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq before going to war, when he said, this is our evidence. Actually, he gave false evidence. In this case, Kerry didn't even present any evidence. He says, we have evidence, and he didn't present anything. Not yet. Nothing so far. And then Assad reiterates, not a single shred of evidence. Then Assad goes on. The first question that they should ask themselves, what do wars give America? He's saying now this is what the American people should be asking themselves. Nothing. No political gain, no economic gain, no good reputation. The United States is at an all-time credibility, at an all-time low. So this war is against the interest of the United States. Furthermore, this is the war that is going to support Al-Qaeda, the same people that killed Americans in the September the 11th, 2001 attack. And he's making a powerful point because that is, in fact, who's trying to overthrow his government, Al-Qaeda. And he's saying you're going to go fight on the side of Al-Qaeda. So we expect, if we want to expect something from the U.S. administration, it's not to be weak, but to be strong, to say that we don't have evidence that we have to obey, or that we have to obey the international law, that we have to go back to the Security Council at the United Nations. Notice in all this dialogue, there's a repeated enforcement of international law. International law is being pushed to a higher and higher level of credibility right now. When we say international law, what we mean is world government. He said that the American people should say, we have to obey international law, or we have to obey the world government. We have to go back to the Security Council at the United Nations. Rose, question remains, what can you say to the president who believes chemical weapons were used and were used by your government, that this will not happen again? I will tell him very simply, present what you have as evidence to the public. Be transparent. And if he does, this is Assad again. This is where you can discuss the evidence, because he doesn't have it. He didn't present it because he doesn't have it. Kerry doesn't have it. No one in your administration has evidence. If they had it, they would have presented it to you as the media from the very first day. And then again, Assad drives the point home. Nothing presented, nothing has been presented so far. Then Assad continues on. You want me to believe American evidence, and you don't believe the indications that we have. We live here, Assad said. Now, I'm skipping down through here because it's much too long to take the whole thing, but I wanted to give you at least some sense of the back and forth between Charlie Rose and President Bashar Assad. As long as the United States, this is Assad again, as long as the United States doesn't obey the international law and trample over the Charter of the United Nations, we have to worry that any administration, not only this one, would do anything. But according to the lies that we've been hearing for the last 2 weeks from high-ranking officials in this administration, we have to expect the worst. Rose, are you suggesting that if in fact there's a strike, there would be repercussions against the United States from your friends in other countries like Iran or Hezbollah or others? Yes, as I said, it may take different forms, direct and indirect. Then Assad went on to say, exactly, any strike will be as direct support to al-Qaeda offshoot that's called al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. You're right about this. It's going to be direct support. In other words, you're going to be fighting for al-Qaeda if you attack the government of Syria. Assad went on to say, we are against any weapons of mass destruction, any weapons either chemical or nuclear. And then Assad interrupts, so you're against the use of chemical warfare? Yes. Then Rose said, but you're not a signatory to the Chemical Warfare Convention. Assad says, not yet. Rose said, why not? And Assad's reply is, because Israel has weapons of mass destruction and it has to sign. And Israel is occupying our land. So that's why we talked about the Middle East, not Syria, not Israel. It should be comprehensive for the entire Middle East. Syria is saying we proposed a Middle East free of weapons of mass destruction, but because Israel has weapons of mass destruction, referring to Israel's nuclear capability, he said we can't dismantle our weapons until Israel will dismantle her weapons at the same time. Then Rose says, so do you consider chemical warfare equivalent to nuclear warfare? Assad says, I don't know. We haven't tried either. Then Assad finally says, but at the end, killing is killing, no matter how you do it. Finally, Charlie Rose said, but now they say these words about you, Mr. Assad, you're a butcher. Comparisons to the worst dictators ever to walk on the face of the earth, comparing you to them using weapons that go beyond warfare. Everything they could say bad about a dictator, they're now saying about you. Assad's reply, First, you have the following: a doctor who cuts the leg off to prevent the patient from gangrene. If you have to do that, we don't call him a butcher, we call him a doctor. And you thank that doctor for saving lives. When you have terrorism, you have a war. When you have a war, you always have innocent lives that could be the victim of any war. So Bashar Assad says, we have an uprising against us. It's a terrorist uprising, and I've had to fight it off. And yes, many innocent people have died. Nevertheless, I'm not a butcher. I'm a surgeon. I'm cutting off the infection in order for the patient to live. Well, that's a rough overview of the interview with Mr. Charlie Rose and Bashar al-Assad. Assad is adamant that the West has no evidence that he has used chemical weapons, and that some of his own soldiers were taken to the hospital because they fell prey to these nuclear weapons. He said, to these chemical weapons? He said, why would I use those against my own soldiers? So that's the contention. He brings up how that Colin Powell went before the world, spoke before the United Nations, and gave false evidence, which has now been proven to be false, trying to influence the world as to why the U.S. should go against Iraq back in 2003. So he says this is the same thing right now. Okay, well, there's a lot of other things pinned in here. Oh, by the way, we will be taking your calls on the program today. The number to call is 877-END-TIME. That's 877-363-8463. Exciting news. Now, I've been away from the microphone for a few days, and we've had great response for the Israel Project and the Jerusalem Prophecy College. Our total stands at $867,560.19, which means we're $80,000 away from closing on the Jerusalem Prophecy College property in downtown Jerusalem. Terrific. We're going to make it. You all are wonderful. Thank you. Don't stop now, though, because we've got to buy the college, and then we do have some remodeling to do, which will require some additional. But we're moving fast. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back.